Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Zeus Grants Stupid Wishes, a no-bullshit guide to world mythology, by Cory O'Brien. Narrated by Cory O'Brien. To Tiresias Chang, for giving me the idea for this whole thing in the first place. And to Christina Sheldon, I met you in a bar when I was 13 and promised to dedicate my first book to you. You probably thought I was joking. Introduction, or the part of this book you can safely tear out if you need to make it slightly lighter for some reason. Sup guys, here's a book that I wrote, and I hope you enjoy it. A lot of what is in it comes from my website, which is on the internet, but there is a lot of stuff that is only in this book too, like this introduction. So I figure I better use this opportunity to say some things about myths and the writing thereof. First off, I think anybody who complains that a retelling of a myth is inaccurate doesn't really understand what it means to retell a myth, or probably even what a myth is. Yes, there are some non-canon additions in this book, I'm sure you'll spot a few. I always stay true to the general arc of the story, but my retellings aren't always canon in the obsessive fanboy sense. I have spent the last 3 years frantically accumulating mythological knowledge and distilling it into what some have affectionately called the death of intellectualism. I am proud of this, because I think that lately myths have suffered from a severe intellectualism overdose. Everybody's always studying them in school or reading watered-down versions of them to little kids, and what that means is that hardly anybody has the time to actually sit down and look at how fucking funny these things are. I mean, for a long, long time, the difference between a good story and a bad story was whether a bard could memorize it well enough to not get eviscerated by a mead hall full of drunken barbarians. These things are holy, sure, in a way, but they are definitely designed to cater to the lowest common denominator. Speaking of common denominators, one of the guys who I read a lot of while I was making this book was a dude named Joseph Campbell. He wrote a book called The Hero with 1,000 Faces, which is both an incredibly sweet title and an incredibly insightful book. One of the things he spends a lot of time talking about is how similar the mythologies of different cultures are, and how that arises out of our innate neurological similarities as human beings. You'll see what I mean when you get a ways into this book. What I think is particularly interesting, though, and what I wanted to talk about here, is one of the things he says in his introduction, which is that a lot of the psychological problems that we experience today may stem from our rejection of mythology. Like, if this stuff came out of our common human brain problems, isn't it kind of dangerous to pretend that they're no longer relevant? I mean, sure, they're a little outdated, but that's where I come in, my friends. We can rebuild these myths. We have the technology. We can make them snappier, flashier. It would be hard to make them sexier, but you get where I'm going with this. It's been too long since someone snatched these myths out of the past and pitched them screaming into our everyday lives. In The Hero with 1,000 Faces, Joseph Campbell says that the role of the ancient priest, the role of guiding people through their spiritual crises with mythology, has been taken over by the modern psychologist. Well, I'm no psychologist, but I once talked to one for almost 10 minutes at a grocery store, so come on, let me massage your brain with my myths. Greek. Ah, the Greeks. Dead longer than America has even existed, and still invading our lives with their myths. If you drive a car, you may have bought auto parts from Midas. If you listen to internet radio, you might be acquainted with Pandora. If you got laid today, you might have spotted a Trojan on the condom, if you use condoms, which you should, but if you don't, then you're probably a lot like Zeus and/or Aphrodite, so you can't escape these myths no matter what. My friends, the extent to which we idolize these Greek myths is ridiculous. Poets can't stop talking about them. We carve crazy Greek-looking columns into all our national monuments. We name our planets after the Roman versions of them. And now, you are about to get the inside scoop on them. Cronus likes to eat babies. So everybody knows Zeus is the king of the gods, right? Wrong. I mean, he is the king of the gods, but first of all, not everybody knows that, and second of all, he wasn't always the king of the gods. Because, see, for a while there was this guy Uranus, who was a total asshole, Uranus. Anyway, he was the king of the gods, born out of the sky, or maybe it was the ether, but either way, he was definitely married to Gaia, who some sources say also gave birth to him, so awkward. But like I was saying, Uranus bones Gaia a bunch because it is basically just him and Gaia alone in the universe, and what else are they going to do? And they have a whole bunch of kids. But then Uranus suddenly decides he hates all of the kids, and instead of, giving them up for adoption or something, he decides to try and stuff them all back into his wife. These are not the babies I ordered, I am returning them to the baby store. Which I think demonstrates a really shocking lack of understanding of how babies are made. Now, Gaia is the entire Earth, you understand. So this would be fine if they were normal-sized children, babies or something, but they are not babies. They are titans. Ow. So all these titans are writhing around in Gaia's womb, going nuts. And Gaia gets seriously fed up with this nonsense and tells one of them, whose name is Cronus, "Hey Cronus, why don't you and your candy-ass brothers get out of my womb and do something useful, like murder your father?" And Cronus says, "How about I do you one better and saw off his balls?" And Gaia says, "That sounds like a fantastic plan. Here, have my ball-sawing scythe." So one night, Uranus is about to get busy with Gaia, again. I guess so he can father another baby and then stuff it back into her. But instead of getting sex, he gets a surprise penisectomy. Cronus all jumping out from behind a rock like, "Ha-ha, got your dick, Dad," which is something no son should ever have to say to his father. Then Uranus's dick falls into the ocean and makes a whole ton of foam, and that is where Aphrodite comes from eventually, from dick foam. You know that painting with her standing on the shell with all the angels and stuff? Dick foam. All of it. So then Cronus is king of the gods suddenly. The gods being actually the other titans, including some dudes called the Cyclopes, who you probably know about already. They are the ones with the congenitally poor depth perception. And also some other dudes called the Hecatonchires, who are significantly less talked about because they have 100 hands each, and that is terrifying. So naturally, Uranus especially hated these freaks when he was king, and part of Cronus's whole campaign platform for killing Uranus was that he was totally going to free those dudes, but no sooner is he king than he goes psych and stuffs them right back into Gaia's cooch again. So obviously Gaia is pretty sore about this whole thing, and then to make matters worse, an oracle tells Cronus that his kid is going to kill him, and he's like, "Oh shit, which kid? I've got a gazillion kids. I need to cut down. Maybe I should stuff them into my..." Wait a second. I'm becoming my father. So instead, Cronus comes up with a more sensible alternative, which is to stuff all his kids into his stomach. But the fact that he is eating his kids does not stop him from banging his wife Rhea, because when you are king of the gods, banging is what you do. So she keeps having kids, and he keeps demanding to eat them. But after a while, she catches on to his crafty prank, and when she gives birth to Poseidon, she's like, "That's weird. I gave birth to a horse instead of a kid. Oops." And Cronus has no reason to disbelieve her because, hey, if Aphrodite can come from dick foam, why can't Rhea pop out a horse? So he eats the horse instead of Poseidon, and then he gets Rhea preggers again, and this time she is pregnant with Zeus. And when Cronus is like, "Hey wife, serve me up a double children cheeseburger with waffle fries and extra placenta," she is super crafty and just takes a big rock, dresses it up like a baby, and then feeds it to Cronus. All like, "Man, my womb is sure serving up some crazy stuff lately, huh?" But Cronus catches on to that prank pretty fast and starts running around putting random parts of the world in his mouth, hoping to find the one that has his son in it. So Rhea is like, "Hey Zeus, you know what you should do? You should go free those freaky mutant titans your dad imprisoned and use them to murder your dad." And Zeus says, "I'll do you one better. How about instead of killing him, I make him vomit up all my siblings, and then I just kind of imprison him somewhere?" And Rhea is like, "Well, it isn't very brutal, but it is kind of gross, so okay." So Zeus and those ugly one-eyed dudes and the really ugly 100-handed dudes all siege the crap out of Cronus, and then they stick their fingers down his throat, and he barfs up all the gods and goddesses, or at least a lot of them. The rest get born later. And then Zeus is the king of the gods, and those Titan dudes are still ugly, so Zeus ends up imprisoning them all again. So the moral of the story is that if you are not ready to be a father, consider all of your options before.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?